to, and that is to address old Reginald Sharpe Jr. Now, you may have known about him longer than I have. I think I first heard of him last month. And it's just a mess. But he tried to get in a lot of theological stuff in this sermon I listened to. We're just going to get right into it. We're going to get right into it, and just to let people know.
As for this last service of the day and this message in a movie series, I want to talk about a message from Mrs. Doubtfire. A message from Mrs. Doubtfire. Not sure if you've ever seen that movie, but before this day is over, I am about to spoil the entire movie for you. And I love this series because I get to have fun and have a creative way of connecting the truths of the gospel to something that we all see every day. Everybody loves a good movie. And for me, one of my favorite movies growing up was Mrs. Doubtfire. I like that movie.
So he's going to preach Mrs. Doubtfire as his sermon. I don't know what is what's been the main attraction of these pastors preaching movies as their sermons lately. Go ahead. You got it. Go ahead.
So here's the deal. As soon as he said message in a movie, I said, oh, this is nothing but a church growth tactic. So you have to understand in this whole church growth movement, they're not interested in using the Bible and the biblically prescribed model for how to grow the church, which is you make disciples and then they're added to the church. No. This is a tactic that they use by finding a movie. We've seen this with a lot of the larger ministries, the ones that have like the really big budgets that can buy the licensing to some of the big box office movies. But this is his bootleg version of the church. It's a church growth tactic. What they'll do is they'll find a movie and they'll use the movie as the springboard for their sermon. And then they will attempt to find some sort of biblical truth out of the movie, and then they'll preach that as the message. And it's quite an interesting strategy in the sense that when people have a low view of scripture and their Bible weight is not up, they don't have the attention span to actually sit through good biblical exposition. So when you bring in a movie, such as Mrs. Doubtfire, it's, a funny little comedy. It's kind of lighthearted. Everyone, well, depending on how old you are, is familiar with such a movie. It has a way of keeping the attention of the people, right? And then you can somehow bring a loosely, I'll use this term loosely, biblical application from the movie. To me, this is so insulting to adults. Right? Because it's basically saying y'all don't have the emotional intelligence or maturity to sit through me preaching through the Bible in all of its authenticity. You actually need me to entertain you. And you need me to entertain you because you ain't opened your Bible all week. You don't have the appetite to actually sit through what God has spoken. So therefore, I got to bring in this church growth tactic and entertain you with Mrs. Doubtfire and hope that you get some kind of lesson out of it that's going to be a blessing for your life somehow. But that's why they do it.
Yeah.
That's why they do it.
Yeah. And what you find is you actually get more movie than Bible in all these sermons. The movie becomes the main reference point, and the Bible, you just kind of like throw some verses on just because, we got to make it Christian. So now the Mrs. Doubtfire becomes some kind of biblical reference to the Christian faith. And some of you may be like, how is he going to spin a cross-dressing movie, getting it to his kids about the Christian faith? How is this man possibly going to do this? That's a great question. And I will be asking the same thing if I didn't hear this sermon. Now,
I haven't heard it, y'all, just to be fair. So this is going to be interesting.
So we're going to shock you guys and also shock my guests into what this sermon is actually going to be about. So without further ado, let's see how he's going to spin this movie. So let's get into our first clip on this.
Let the church say Incarnation. Verse 19 says, that is, in Christ, God was reconciling the world back to himself. Don't read that too fast. God came in Jesus and brought us back to himself. God stepped in the shoes of a human and said, I'm going down there myself. God is in Jesus. John said he's the Word made flesh, which simply means when you see Jesus, you see the Father trapped in flesh. You see majesty wrapped in.
No. Boy, ain't no way, boy. Boy, ain't no way, boy.
So the Word being made flesh. So now we're about to see kind of how this is evolving. I had to stop it there. We're going to continue, but I had to stop it there. So he believes the Word made flesh means the Father became, hey, we're going to use his own words, trapped in the body of a man called Jesus. Now, what is let's test our heresy game. What is this theology called? For those in the chat, I see Brother Rick Caldwell, man, he's fresh on the dial, man. He got his finger all over it. Yes, that's oneness theology.
Right. So I was about to ask. I was like, do I smell oneness?
Yes, you do.
Dr. Sharpe a oneness?
He is a oneness, yes.
I was like, no, that is not triune language. God trapped himself inside of Jesus. Remember, you guys, we believe in one what and
One
three
God.
who.
Yep.
Right? It's one what, three who's, not one what, one who that shape shifts and metamorphosizes depending on. No, that's heresy.
Now we're going to see how he, try to make this, pardon the pun, transition into into Mrs. Doubtfire, right? He's going to see how he makes this transition into that. But what's so terrible about this oneness theology, in his own view, is that there is no actual son. In true modalism, it's because it's the Father who traps himself in a body of a man. So that's not a son. That's not a true son, right? And so this is why it's heretical, because it denies the eternality of Jesus. And so there's a lot wrong already with his statements. We haven't even, I always bank on this, guys. We haven't even got to the worst part. And that was pretty bad. That was heretically bad, right? And so, but this is his Kojic background. He kind of said in the middle of this sermon that he's Kojic. And so,
but Kojic is Trinitarian, though.
I think some Kojics aren't. Maybe I don't know if he meant that in a more charismatic sense. Maybe he's like one is Pentecostal. I don't know his exact background, but he did refer to him being Kojic. I don't know if he meant that more in a praise and worship sense or
No, I think this is him having a fundamental misunderstanding of what he actually believes. Because at one point he has affirmed that Jesus was just the Son of God and that wasn't God. And now he's saying here that God the Father came down and inserted himself
in a body,
into a person, in a body, like some random unhoused body. I don't know. This is
so
bad.
That sounds so. I have a real good book. Real quick, let me get it because it gets into some of these heresies. Matter of fact, that's actually the name of the book. It's called Heresies.
Cogic.
Right here by. It is Harold O.J. Brown. Right. And this heresy that he's kind of referring to is called adoptionism, where the Father, he comes down into a body. And then, so even adoptionism needs to be explained because some view at Jesus' baptism, the Father kind of indwelled the Son, this man suit. So even that, it's kind of a broad topic, but that's what it kind of sounds like he's trying to get into, some kind of version of adoptionism. Maybe at the Incarnation, at the birth of Jesus, the Father adopted this body and got into that, right? And so, but a good book just to be familiar with your heresies is this one right here for a book reference. But let's continue this because he's not done with this madness.
Manhood, you see sovereignty caught in skin, you see eternity in epidermis and divinity in dermis. When you see Jesus, you see the highest of the holiness of God wrapped in humanity, because God was in Christ coming to bring us back to God's self. preach, Sharpe. I told you I'm trying. God kept trying to use men and women throughout the Bible, but they kept messing up. God wanted to use Adam, but he and his wife went to eating something they shouldn't have been eating. God wanted...
I have to stop it right there because I don't know if you caught that. So God has been all throughout history wanting to use men almost seemingly as some kind of redemptive figure, right? Because that's what Jesus was. And if that's the parallel he's making, God's been trying to use man all throughout history, right? But they just kept messing up. God's just eternally disappointed, right? Like, man, I wanted to use Adam, but man, I didn't know he's gonna mess up. Use Moses, same thing, right? Until we get to this man, which actually he would argue it wasn't just a man, it was some kind of flesh that Jesus, that is the Father, got in. It's all confusing it's like that's what some people have described as like a meat suit. He is actually going to deny. I'm going to argue. Reginald Sharpe actually denies the humanity of Christ. That's my claim. I'm going to prove it by something he says later. By this.
Someone had mentioned that they don't think he intentionally meant it to be oneness because he believes in the Trinity. Here's the issue. We don't know what Reginald believes because we have evidence of him actually saying he didn't even believe that Jesus was God, just the Son of God. You cannot be Trinitarian and hold that position. No. So it's not that we're overcooking over here. The issue is this man's own words have been inconsistent and unbiblical on more than one occasion. And if you're saying that, oh no, he's a Trinitarian, then he needs to clarify his position, pull all of this other old bad content of him saying these heretical things down. In fact, he shouldn't even be preaching.
Exactly.
Because if you don't know what it is that you believe and why you believe it, and then you're teaching others, and I'm not saying you have to have perfect doctrine and theology, but on Christian theology proper, like you shouldn't have YouTubers on here saying, homeboy, listen, I don't think you understand the nature of Christ or how God has revealed himself. Like that's a problem. That is a huge problem. So I just want to get that out and say that.
And no Trinitarian would say the Father was trapped in a human body. I mean, you have left the playing field of Trinitarian theology. And if you're confused, to your point, you shouldn't be up there preaching, right?
You shouldn't.
And so let's continue this clip out. Yeah.
To use Noah, but as soon as he got off the ark, he got drunk off of too much wine. God wanted to use Moses, but he was a murderer. God wanted to use Abraham, but he was a liar. God wanted to use Jacob, but he was conniving and a trickster. God wanted to use David, but he took a man's life and then took a man's wife. God wanted to use Solomon, but he had too many women in his life. God wanted to use Jeremiah, but he couldn't get his emotions together. He was a weeping prophet. God wanted to use Ezekiel, Daniel, Obadiah, Zechariah, Zephaniah, Micah, and Nahum and Malachi, but those men could not get the work of reconciliation done. So God said, I'll go myself.
See, if you notice, they were God was trying to use them for reconciliation, but they couldn't get it done. So God stepped in and said, fine, I'll come in myself. So this actually denies the eternal plan of God. That's
what I was just about to say. Like, God's redemptive plan has always been Jesus and through Christ and Christ alone. Like, this is a flat out lie.
This ain't even plan B. This ain't even plan B theology. This is plan what's after Z. Like, God tried to use hundreds, if not thousands of people to bring about reconciliation, but they all failed. So he was like, I guess I'll do it.
No, the Bible never teaches that God's redemptive plan could have possibly been brought about by all of these other sinful people. Like, you and I are doomed. If God wanted to use Moses, wanted to use Abraham, wanted to use David, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, like, pick whoever you want.
Exactly.
We would have been doomed because none of those men were sinless and completely perfect. right? Like they
Right.
are men, flawed, born in sin, shaped in iniquity, just like you and I. So for someone to even remotely imply, like this is a pretty long diatribe
Yeah.
to teach your people that God wanted to, for his redemptive purposes, wanted to use all these other people, but it was just something wrong with him, tells me that he doesn't understand the substitutionary atonement and why that is so important. Right? Like, or how do you even imply that these other people could have been used, but it was just this one little situation, Jeremiah couldn't get a handle on his emotions, so he couldn't use him either. Like, no, why are you attacking the nature of Christ? Why are you messing with God's redemptive plan that was established before any of us ever got here? Like, that was his plan and purpose from all along. It wasn't a second thought. It wasn't a plan B. It wasn't like, well, this ain't working, so let me just go on and try Jesus.
In light of our last video, how does that work in light of Genesis 3:15, where God promised from very early, as soon as man sinned, that the proto-evangelium, that the Messiah would come. So it doesn't sound like he was like, I'm trying to use somebody else. Adam fell, then I'm gonna try to go to. I mean, prophecies all throughout the Old Testament of Yahweh the King. Isaiah speaks of God Himself will come to redeem humanity, right. And so I don't know how he's getting this theology. Someone asked, did he?
It sounds good. It sounds good. Like if you can homiletically put together a narrative that can whip people up into an emotional frenzy, use a bunch of alliteration and nice little, mic drop clapbacks. When people have not, if they're not tethered to the scriptures, they'll be like, that Reginald Sharpe, he sure did preach. Like, he bought the house down. You'll be like, well, what'd he preach about? And you'll be like, I don't know, but it sure sounded good.
Yeah. Well, let's finish this part off. We'll go to our next clip.
And God came in Jesus. Jesus is the very man of man, and he's the very God of God. I love him because he's fully man and he's fully God at the same time. I feel like
which one
preaching.
is it, Reginald? Because that ain't what you told us.
Well, here's how he's not necessarily contradicting himself, because remember, in oneness, it's the Father who comes in flesh. So oneness would affirm God or Jesus being fully God and fully man. What they deny is him being distinct from the Son.
His personhood.
Right, exactly. The Son's actual personhood. Okay. And so he's not necessarily... Now, he's about to contradict himself later by trying to compare this all to Mrs. Remember, he's preaching the movie of Mrs. Doubtfire. So he's about to contradict himself a mess. So watch this, because we're about to get to the topic of incarnation and make some kind of parallel with Mrs. Doubtfire. Let's listen to this.
The first word I gave you was what? Reconciliation. Second word I gave you was what? Incarnation. Third word I gave you is what? Exoneration. Fourth word I gave you is what? Salvation. Fifth words I gave you are what? New creation. Now, you got to understand those words and this text in order to understand what God showed me in Mrs. Doubtfire. Because
God showed it?
The story is this.
Yeah. So God showed him what he's about to say. God showed him this. Okay, I just want everybody to be clear. This is supposed to be revelation. And matter of fact, I guess since God's told him this, we're now obligated to believe that, right? I mean, so let's see what the movie, this movie has revealed. The 67th book of the canon, Mrs. Doubtfire.
Husband and wife get divorced, and because the father lost his job and doesn't have a stable place to live, the judge says, your wife is going to get full custody of the children. You can come back in 90 days and we can discuss this, but your wife is going to have full custody. You can only see them a couple days on the weekend. He went crazy. He said, no. All I have is my children. I love my children. He was a father who actually wanted to be in his children's life. And so he said, wait a minute, I got to find out something to do. He finds out that the wife is trying to find a nanny. And so he literally finagles. I don't know if y'all use that word up here in Chicago. Y'all know y'all got big words and big vocabularies, but down in Georgia, we say finagle. He rigged the system from her looking for a nanny, and he pretended to be a British nanny, old white woman, changed his voice, and literally tricked his ex-wife and his children just so he could be with them. So the first insight I want to tell you is from this movie is very simple. Daniel Hilliard, played by Robin Williams, dressed as Mrs. Doubtfire to remain close to his children. Daniel Hilliard, Robin Williams, dressed up as a woman just so he could stay close to his children. Took on another costume.
You will stop.
Just so he could stay in relationship with his children. Doesn't that sound like Incarnation? Daniel Hilliard dressed up like Mrs. Doubtfire just so he could stay close to his children. That's what God did through Jesus. God left the royal heights of eternity and came down to the crusted earth, stepped in the flesh of Jesus just so God could stay close to his children. I'm trying to tell you something. You ought to thank God that it wasn't just Mrs. Doubtfire. God did the same thing for us. And because he came as Jesus, we're saved right now.
I'm tired of the church.
Okay, there is so much mess in what he said. Trying to make this parallel between Miss Doubtfire, right? Daniel Hilliard becoming Miss Doubtfire doesn't even remotely touch what the Bible teaches. Let me give you a few reasons why, right? Because he said that God tricked, so he made this parallel of God tricking, or Miss Doubtfire tricking his children, pretended to be a woman. Is this what God actually did? Did he trick us? Did God trick us in becoming a man? And nobody knew Jesus was actually God during the Incarnation? Did he pretend to be a man? He said that. Remember, this is why I say he actually denies the humanity of Christ. If he's trying to make this parallel, even the whole trans cross-dressing thing is actually very problematic from a biblical perspective, right? Let's be honest about that. But if he's trying to make this parallel Daniel Hilliard became Mrs. Doubtfire. So a man pretends to be a woman. He's not actually a woman. So if this parallel exists, God pretended to be a man, but he's not actually a man. Is that the parallel he's trying to come off?
The issue is that this is so disrespectful.
Really?
This is so disrespectful because you're trying so hard to draw a parallel that you can't.
Right.
Or some sort of example that you actually would imply that through deception, that God the Father, I don't even feel comfortable even saying it, but it just demonstrates that these preachers like this, they don't think about the implications of their bad illustrations. They want to be so coy and so slick and so like, ooh, that was so creative and clever, that they don't realize the implications of the examples that they use and how it tramples on the omnipresence of God. Like, right. God doesn't have to deceive and trick and put himself into a fake trans body to be near his children. God is everywhere at all times, and he's ever present with us. Like, what is wrong with you?
And in that analogy, doesn't God seem desperate? Like, he's just trying to get close to his children. He'll do anything it takes, even deceive people. See, if you actually want to be, God is actually a deceiver in what Reginald Sharpe is arguing for. Right. By trying to make some parallel to the movie, because you wanted to preach this movie so bad, you are actually, preaching much heresy, but actually accusing God of doing something deceiving. Look at the language he used. Finessed, finagled, right? And apply that to God. Tricked.
Right. The issue is that in the movie, he had to remain hidden, because if his true identity would have come out, it would have been disastrous. And yes, it is an endearing story. Like, we're not going to trample on Mrs. Doubtfire all because this dude can't preach a good sermon, right? We're not
it was a good movie.
It's a great movie.
We like the movie.
I actually do like the movie, but this is a bad example, because when you try to draw parallels like this, you end up attacking the character and nature of God, and you end up distorting what Christ actually did for us in the incarnation. There was no deception present, and God didn't put himself into a meat suit like as if he had to go to this extraordinary length, right, in order just to be near to his children. No, salvation is of the Lord. The plan was already established before the foundation of the world. It had already been established through grace who God would draw to himself. It's just a bad example and demonstrates either he doesn't understand scripture or he don't care. He just wants to be so relevant and be the newest hot thing on the scene that he'll preach heresy and a bad movie example in order to illustrate a point that don't even need all this to illustrate.
Well, sis, I think it's the latter. I don't think he cares at all, because the audience don't care either. Because a Bible student, right? Imagine you being in this audience, you're hearing this sermon with the Bible open, and you're just like, what are we talking about? I mean, if I didn't walk out, I probably would stand up and be like, what are you saying, man? Like, I mean, you know, people who actually read the Bible and take it serious wouldn't be in this church. Let's be real right there. They wouldn't be in this church. I mean, he is pro LGBT, liberal as all get out. All this stuff the Bible doesn't promote.
Right. And plus, Jesus did not hide his identity. Right. He literally declared himself equal with God, and that's why they wanted to stone him. But
exactly.
Yet Mrs. Doubtfire couldn't even tell the children, hey, I'm dad. Like,
he actually gives the Pharisees an excuse. If Jesus is hiding his identity, then the Pharisees were right to doubt.
Right.
You know, but obviously Jesus was declaring who he was. I mean, talking about prophecy, he's the fulfillment of. So, yeah, it's not even a good parallel. I mean, it's a terrible parallel, and it's a heretical one at that. But let's get to this next one here, because he's going to continue on with this theme.
That's Incarnation. But there's something else I want to tell you about Ms. Doubtfire. Ms. Doubtfire's name is significant, too. Because the day that Robin Williams playing the character of Daniel Hilliard, wanted to call his ex-wife and pretend to be this nanny, he was on the phone and he changed his voice. And finally, at the end of the call, she wanted to meet this white, old British woman. And she said, "What's your name?" He said, "My name? I didn't give you my name." Of course, he had not given a name because he didn't have a name for the character he was pretending to be. So he looked down at the newspaper and he saw the headline said, "Police Doubtfire was accidental." He said, "Oh, my name is Mrs. Doubtfire." The name Mrs. Doubtfire wasn't his real name, but depending on who he needed to be in the movie, he was Mrs. Doubtfire some scenes, but he was Daniel other scenes. Depending on who he needed to talk to, he became different things for whoever needed him in that moment. Y'all sleep at the 115 service. God does the same thing. And all this worship service, you've been wondering why this person on your row keeps standing up, shaking their head, waving their hands. It's because you don't know what God has been to them. See, you just know what God has been to you. But God is so big, God has so many names, he can become whatever we need him to be when we get in whatever we're in. For somebody, he's been a healer, but for somebody else, he's been a keeper. For somebody else, he's been a mother. For somebody else, he's been a father. For somebody else, he's been a sustainer. For somebody else, he's been a lawyer. For somebody else, he's been a doctor. But whatever he's been to you, you owe him praise because he's the I am that I am.
How dare you?
Okay. Madness, huh? I mean, so the parallel is, right, Mrs. Doubtfire mixed up this name on the spot, right? So he says God does the same thing. Kind of whatever you need God to be. If you want God to be a healer, he'll be a healer. See, this is actually a denial of God's attributes. Because God is all those things at the same time. Right. He's not becoming wrath. He's not becoming love. He's not becoming gracious. He is what he is. He's not changing
Right.
these attributes and kind of
immutable.
Exactly. He's immutable, doesn't change. And yeah, someone said God doesn't pretend. God isn't pretending, and God doesn't become what we want him to be. That's idolatry. That's literally making up your own God. This is, guess what? Guess who else wanted to do that? The Israelites with the golden calf. They wanted God to be this certain way, and they made up this God that preferred. They didn't want the Holy One of Israel, right? And so this allows people to say, oh, I can just have God be who I want to be. Well, yeah, it's terrible.
The thing is, people, I get it. Okay, so let me just say this, because some people are going to leave room and license for us to have a little sympathy on Dr. Sharpe or Reg. I don't know if he's a doctor or just I don't know. And I actually saw someone say, I actually understand what he was trying to say, but he worded it wrong. Listen, you don't get to be a preacher of the word and lack this much precision.
Exactly.
You don't get to spend all of these years in undergrad, and then you go, your post-secondary education, and you go to seminary, and you want to tout all of these degrees to be this imprecise. This is definitely not a reflection of, oh, he just worded it wrong. You can't stand behind these book boards and preach what you claim to be thus saith the Lord, and your people walk away confused or with a misrepresentation of who God is. That is a huge problem. It demonstrates that you are unskilled in handling God's word, and more importantly, that you are unqualified because you're not able to teach what accords with sound doctrine. And how do you refute those who contradict it when you're actually preaching the contradiction?
Exactly.
This is why I cannot, I'm trying to be as gracious and loving and kumbaya with it. I want to be sensitive to people who are like, well, this my pastor. Yes, but your pastor's a wolf. Okay. And I'm telling you that because I love you, because your soul is in danger if you can try to explain away these doctrinal inconsistencies and these heresies, all because he wanted to be cool and hip and try to pull out some sort of biblical truth from a movie that does not parallel well. Like, God is incomprehensible. To think that you can say, well, we can see some biblical truths from Mrs. Doubtfire and then compare that to God is imbecilic reasoning.
Yeah.
God is not like man. He is other. Like, we way down here with little 3-pound brains, and he is so above and so more lofty than we could ever imagine him to be. To think that you got to dumb God down and equate him to a cross-dressing man is insulting.